You are 28. You are standing outside an apartment building in a city that has been getting more expensive every year you have lived in it. You cannot afford to buy the apartment you are about to walk into and look around. You know this before you ring the bell. The estate agent knows this. Everyone in this transaction is performing a ritual that may or may not end in a decision, and the decision, if it happens, will be the largest financial commitment of your life by a factor of approximately 15. You ring the bell anyway, because the alternative, continuing to pay rent on a place that belongs to someone else, watching the landlord's asset appreciate while your monthly payment builds nothing, has stopped feeling like a reasonable long-term position. This is where the real estate journey begins for most people, not with excitement, with the specific discomfort of knowing that staying still is also a choice, and that choice also has a cost. There are two versions of your relationship with property over the course of your life. In one version, you are always the tenant. Your monthly payment covers shelter, flexibility, and the right not to be responsible for the building when something breaks. These are real benefits. They have real value. And over 30 years, they will have cost you an amount of money that, if it had been directed differently, would have changed your financial life in ways that are difficult to overstate. In the other version, you become, gradually, imperfectly, with more complications than you anticipated, someone who owns property, not necessarily multiple properties, not necessarily a portfolio, just the structural shift from paying into someone else's asset to building your own, from tenant to owner, from renting shelter to acquiring something that compounds. The distance between these two versions is not determined by income alone. It is not determined by luck or timing or having had the right parents. It is determined almost entirely by a willingness to make a decision that is uncomfortable at the moment it needs to be made. Let us walk through what that decision looks like at every level. Level 1, renting. You pay $1,100 a month for an apartment that belongs to someone else. The apartment is fine. The location works. The landlord is distant and functional. Nothing about this situation is dramatically wrong. Over 10 years at this rent, accounting for the increases that will come, because they always come, you will have paid approximately $140,000 into this arrangement, not as an investment, not as equity building, as the cost of access to a place to sleep, cook, and keep your things. That $140,000 will have built you nothing, which is not quite the same as saying it was wasted. Shelter has value, and paying for it is not a financial failure, but it is a fact worth holding clearly, without softening it into comfort it does not deserve. The person who owns the building you live in has a different relationship with your 1/100 than you do. For you, it is an outgoing, a necessary expense that leaves your account every month. For them, it is an income stream. It services a mortgage. It builds equity. It appreciates as the area develops and demand increases. You are, at this level, the mechanism by which someone else's property becomes someone else's wealth. This is not a moral statement. It is a structural one, and structures can be changed. Level 2, first property. The mortgage is approved on a Thursday afternoon. You read the confirmation email 3 times before it feels real. Then you sit with it for a while because the total amount you have just agreed to repay over 25 years, is large enough to require several readings before it settles. You are buying a 2-bedroom apartment in a city that is slightly less expensive than the one you wanted to be in. The commute adds 20 minutes each way. The neighborhood is not quite what you pictured when you imagined this moment. The apartment itself requires work you do not have time for yet. You buy it anyway because you have understood something that took longer to understand than it should have. The perfect property is a concept that functions primarily as a reason not to buy any property. The people who wait for it tend to keep waiting. The people who buy the imperfect one at the uncomfortable moment on terms that feel slightly too large, those are the people who are building something 10 years later. The first mortgage payment leaves your account on the first of the following month. Something shifts. The money that was leaving and building nothing is now leaving and building something, slowly, invisibly, over a timeline that will outlast the discomfort of the commitment. But something. That shift is not dramatic. It is not visible to anyone outside your bank statement. It is real, and it is the beginning of a completely different financial trajectory than the one you were on last month. Level 3, first investment property. You move to a larger apartment 3 years after the purchase. The decision is practical, not an upgrade for its own sake, but a response to a genuine change in your circumstances that makes the original place too small to function in. Instead of selling, you rent it out. The rental income covers 78% of the mortgage on the original apartment. You carry the remaining 22%, a monthly contribution that you have already stress tested against your budget and confirmed is manageable without requiring you to change anything material about how you live. You now own a property that someone else is paying for. Imperfectly, there will be maintenance costs, vacancy periods, tenants who require more management than you anticipated. Gradually, the mortgage will not be cleared for another 22 years, but structurally, you have crossed a threshold that most people who think about property investment believe is only available to people with significant capital. It is not available because you had significant capital. It is available because you had one property bought imperfectly at an uncomfortable moment that you held long enough to give you options. The second property, the investment, is downstream of that decision, which means the real investment decision was the first one made 3 years ago when you bought something you could not yet fully afford in a neighborhood you were not quite certain about. Level 4, portfolio building 3 properties. The administrative reality of this is more substantial than you expected and less overwhelming than you feared. Maintenance calls arrive at inconvenient times. Tenancy renewals require attention you have to schedule around your primary work. The tax filings have become complex enough that you are now paying an accountant who specializes in property income, which is a cost that did not exist 4 years ago and that you have already absorbed into the calculation of whether this makes financial sense. It does make financial sense. The numbers are clear on this, even accounting for the costs. But the more significant shift is not in the numbers, it is in the architecture of your financial life. Your net worth is no longer primarily a function of what you earn. It is a function of what you own, what it appreciates at, and what it yields after costs. These are different variables than the ones you were managing when salary was the primary driver of your financial position. You are no longer, in the most important financial sense, trading time for money. You are trading capital for income. The two are not the same transaction. They do not scale the same way. They do not respond the same way to effort or skill or years of experience. Capital, once working, can work at a pace that human effort cannot match. You are beginning to understand this, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. The understanding changes how you think about every financial decision that follows. Level 5, commercial and development. You are no longer buying existing properties. You are creating them. A derelict commercial building on the edge of a neighborhood that has been gradually improving for 7 years. Planning permission that took 14 months to secure, involving conversations with local authorities, planning consultant, an architect, a structural engineer, and 3 different sets of objections from neighbors who were eventually resolved through a combination of redesign and a meeting that lasted 4 hours. The conversion takes 19 months. It costs 23% more than the projection. Every experienced developer you speak to says this is normal. You file that information away for the next project because there will be a next project, and the 23% overage that felt like a failure on this one is actually the tuition fee for a level of understanding that cannot be acquired any other way. At this level, real estate is not passive. It has not been passive for several levels, if you are honest, but at this level, it is unmistakably a business. Capital intensive, relationship dependent, expertise requiring, time consuming, in ways that compete with everything else in your life for priority. The people who reach this level and continue are the ones who decided at some point that this is not a financial strategy they are running alongside their life. It is a significant part of what their life is. That decision to take it that seriously is what separates the people who build substantial property wealth from the people who own 2 or 3 investment properties and stop there. Level 6, generational property. The conversation shifts, not in any single meeting or decision, but gradually, over a period of years, the question that drives property decisions changes from how do I grow this to how do I structure this, so it continues past me. Family trusts, company structures that hold the portfolio in a form that is more tax efficient to pass on than direct ownership. Conversations with your children that you did not have with your own parents because your parents did not have property to discuss in this way. The properties themselves have been held long enough that some of them have appreciated to values that bear almost no relationship to what you paid for them. The first apartment, the one you bought on that Thursday afternoon, in the neighborhood you were not quite certain about, with the commute that added 20 minutes each way, is now worth 3 times what you paid. You did not do anything clever with that property. You bought it, you held it, you let time work. And time, in property, as in every other form of long-term investment, is the variable that matters more than any single decision made along the way. The trap. The trap has one name. It sounds reasonable. It has been used to justify inaction action across every property market in every decade since property markets existed. The trap is waiting for the right moment. The market is too hot right now. Interest rates are at a level that makes the numbers difficult to justify. The economic outlook contains too much uncertainty to commit to something this large. Your personal finances are not quite in the position you want them to be before you make a decision of this scale. The right property has not appeared yet. Something better is probably coming. Every one of these observations has been made with genuine justification by people in every decade of the last 60 years. In every one of those decades, property in the cities where opportunity concentrates has appreciated. The people who bought in conditions that felt wrong, in markets that felt overheated, at rates that felt high, in neighborhoods that were not yet what they were about to become, built wealth. The people who waited for conditions to feel right, in most cases, kept waiting. This is not an argument that every property at every price in every market is a good purchase. It is an argument that the standard used to determine the right moment, the moment when buying feels comfortable and obviously correct, is a standard that is almost never met, because the conditions that make buying feel obviously correct are also the conditions that make buying most expensive. The discomfort you feel when you are about to make the largest financial commitment of your life is not a signal that the decision is wrong. It is the correct emotional response to the stakes involved. Feeling uncomfortable before signing a mortgage is evidence that you understand what you are doing. It is not evidence that you should not do it. The people who built significant property wealth are not people who felt comfortable at the moment of purchases. They are people who bought while uncomfortable, held while uncertain, and allowed time to convert both of those feelings into irrelevance. The philosophical close. You are standing outside an apartment building in a city that has been getting more expensive every year. You rang the bell. You walked through the rooms. You did the arithmetic on a phone in the kitchen while the estate agent was checking something on their tablet in the hallway. The numbers are uncomfortable. The commitment is large. The neighborhood has things you would change if you could. The commute is longer than you wanted. The apartment is not the one you have been picturing, and you are standing in the kitchen, holding a phone with a calculation on it, making a decision about who you are going to be in this situation. Whether you are going to be the person who buys the imperfect property at the uncomfortable moment, or the person who walks back outside and continues the search for conditions that will never quite arrive. Property is not, at its core, a financial product. It is a decision about permanence, about what you are willing to be responsible for, about whether the version of your financial life where you are always the tenant is a version which you are choosing, or simply a version you have not yet chosen to change. The mathematics of property, held over time, in cities where people want to live, is not particularly complicated. Buy, hold, do not sell when markets fall. Let time work. Repeat where possible. The difficulty is never the mathematics. It is the moment in the kitchen, with the uncomfortable number on the phone, deciding whether the discomfort is a reason to stop or simply the price of starting. The apartment you cannot quite afford today is the asset you cannot believe you almost did not buy. In 10 years, when the calculation looks entirely different, and the only question left is why you waited so long. Curious about how much wealth different professions can build? Subscribe now and join us as we explore the income, lifestyle, and net worth behind the world's most fascinating careers.